There is a shared motif in some ancient myths, and it is known as Chaoskampf, the battle between chaos and order personified by gods, one of which is a sea serpent or dragon. Tiamat was the primordial saltwater dragon in the Babylonian creation myth known as the Enuma Elish. In the story, she is slain by the storm god Marduk, who splits her body in two to form the heavens and the earth. It's a cosmic battle, with order represented by Marduk, defeating chaos, embodied by Tiamat. Now compare that to Genesis 1. There's no dramatic battle, but Yahweh still conquers chaos, not by slaying a monster, but by dividing the waters and turning the chaos into order. In Genesis 1 verse 2, the Bible begins with darkness over the deep. In Hebrew, tehom. Scholars point out that tehom is a linguistic cognate of Tiamat. That doesn't mean the biblical authors copied her name, but both words likely derive from an older Semitic root, meaning deep or sea. Both Tehom and Tiamat, then, are personifications or symbols of the primordial waters of chaos. Even more striking, Tiamat is the saltwater goddess, and in Genesis 1, it's the salt water, the sea, that God divides and pushes back to create habitable space. But how do Jehovah's Witnesses respond to this? In their encyclopedia, Insight on the Scriptures, they write, "While some have pointed to what seemed to them to be similarities between the Babylonian epic and the Genesis account of creation, it is readily apparent from the preceding consideration of the biblical creation narrative and the foregoing epitome of the Babylonian myth that they are not really similar. Therefore, a detailed analysis of them side by side is unnecessary." The refusal to even examine the parallels speaks volumes. Watchtower literature often acknowledges scholarly views briefly, only to immediately dismiss them, and often without explaining them correctly. But scholars aren't saying Genesis copied the Babylonian myth word for word. What they're pointing to are the echoes, the shared imagery, themes, and language that suggest the biblical authors were aware of these older myths and were deliberately reshaping them. Genesis isn't trying to be neutral. It's trying to one-up the old stories. It's saying, no, our God didn't have to fight the sea. He just spoke, and order came. This demythologizing move, replacing gods and monsters with divine speech, is part of how Genesis asserts that Israel's God is greater than the chaotic forces feared in Babylon and Canaan. And Genesis 1 is not the only place where these ancient myths echo through the Bible. We'll explore that in the next video. Don't forget to check the other resources in the description.